from The Prisoner's Dilemma. Please join me in welcoming Matt.
Madam Toastmaster. Hands up, freeze. You're going to prison. I want each of you to be thinking like a prisoner right now, because we're going to be talking about the prisoner's dilemma. The prisoner's dilemma is really just a conceptual vehicle for an idea from a field called game theory. The idea is that decisions based on self-interest conflict with progress towards collective interest. Our goal today is to understand the implications of the prisoner's dilemma concept and to determine if self-interest can be reconciled with collective interest in the real world. Slide 3, please. So, let us first consider an example of the prisoner's dilemma. Two members of a criminal gang are imprisoned. Each is in solitary confinement with monochromatic light shining on their faces. No means of communicating with one another. The prosecutors don't have enough evidence to convict them on their principal charge. Both prisoners hope to get sentenced to only a year on a lesser charge. So the prosecutors come up with this strategy. They offer both prisoners a bargain simultaneously to testify against the other prisoner. The table at the bottom of this chart shows the outcomes for all combinations of prisoner A choosing to either cooperate and stay silent with his partner in the other room, or choosing to defect and betray him and basically rat him out, and also with prisoner B. If one prisoner takes the bargain and rats out his partner, and the other stays silent, then the one who stays silent will get 3 years in prison, while the one who betrayed will go free. If both prisoners betray one another, they'll each serve 2 years. If both prisoners silently cooperate with one another, then they'll each just serve 1 year on a lesser charge. So, next slide, please. So, looking at this logically from prisoner A's perspective, from an individual perspective, you are prisoner A. What do you do? So, you have no control, essentially, over what prisoner B is going to choose. So, you basically can't tell which column in the table you're going to end up in. So we can call the left column case A and the right column case B. What you do have control over is what row you're going to end up in. We can call the top row choice 1 and the bottom row choice 2. Now, focusing in on case A. If case A is true and the other guy cooperates silently with you, what are your options? Well, with choice 1, you're going to spend 1 year in prison. With choice 2, you're going to be walking away free. Walking away free is clearly better than spending a year in prison, so choice 2 is better. Alright, what about in case B, looking at the other column? Well, choice 1 will lead you to be spending 3 years in the big house, while choice 2, only 2 years. So in both cases, choice 2 is better. So no matter what the other guy decides, it's always in your self-interest to betray and defect to take the prosecutor's bargain. Next slide, please. So based on what we discussed, we can conclude that both prisoners individually are likely to come to the same conclusion, and they're always going to betray one another. So let's now consider a different perspective, not an individual perspective, but as a group. In the collective perspective, I've added the sum of both of the terms of the two prisoners together in the table. So now you see if they both cooperate, you have 2 years collectively, 1 for each prisoner. If you're in the cases where one talks and the other doesn't, you have 3 years collectively. And if they both rat each other out, you have 4 years. From a collective point of view, the best outcome is when they both cooperate. You only get 2 years altogether. Whereas the worst outcome is when they both betray one another, and you get 4. So unfortunately, based on what we looked at on the previous slide, pursuit of self-interest leads to the worst outcome for the collective group. So that's kind of an interesting view of the world. What do we make out of that? Slide 6, please. Does this mean that self-interest is inherently incompatible with achieving the best collective outcomes in the real world? have a little image of a dog-eat-dog world out there. Should we all feel guilty for having self-interest? Next slide. So to answer these questions, let's consider another example with the same numbers in the table, but this time a key difference which makes it more in line with realistic situations. There are two business partners in the same industry. Each can choose whether to pursue a cooperative strategy or they can attempt to cheat their partner over the course of a year. The key difference in this case is that now we want to consider the possibility of future interactions between these partners and how decisions in one year can affect future years. So you can ask yourself, if your partner betrays you in one round, how likely are you to be willing to cooperate in future rounds? They've kind of they've lost your trust, and they kind of have soured their reputation. You'll be less likely to cooperate with them in the future. Because of this concept, your partner will be worse off in every future opportunity because you're going to put them in the bottom row instead of the top row. This essentially makes them lose, the numbers we're using are millions of dollars instead of years this time, $1 million for every future interaction if they sour their reputation with you. Pulling all of these concepts together, what we can draw from this is that your partner is worse off in the long run if he betrays you, even if he makes a gain in the short term. Next slide, please. Most day-to-day interactions are not like the prisoner's dilemma in that one decision can actually affect future interactions. The value of reputation is not always easy to evaluate because it's not tangible. However, ignoring it can lead to faulty decision-making. In the table below, we have the same numbers before, but we also have the effects of each decision on the reputations of both partners. In case A, choosing to cheat will result in the loss of reputation, but a tangible savings of $1 million. If the expected value of gains from future potential cooperation due to having a good reputation is worth more than this $1 million that you're saving right now, then it's in your overall self-interest to cooperate. The reasoning applies to case B as well. Instead of talking about spending $1 million versus spending 0, we're now talking about spending $3 million versus 2. In the same way, you can save $1 million by cheating, but you'll lose your reputation. And if your reputation's worth at least that much, then you're better off maintaining your more valuable reputation. So, next slide, please. Our takeaway here is that considering the impacts of, our takeaway overall in considering the impacts of the prisoner's dilemma is that self-interest usually is compatible with collective interest if viewed from a long-sighted perspective that considers future opportunities. This involves being able to consider and factor in intangible values such as reputation and trust. It is too easy for most of us to ignore intangible values and think in the short term. But what we've learned is that resisting this natural urge and being more careful in your decision making can both lead to collective success and also be within your own self-interest. Thank you.
Thank you, Miguel.